It's not negative that we're educated, but education has to lead to a skill, because if someone's going to employ you or you're going to become an entrepreneur, you've got to produce a product or provide a service that someone buys. It's very simple. It's not complex. It's very, very fundamental. All glory, honor, grace, and praise to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Many people have asked, since I've been coming here, that I never bring my wife. Are you really married? Yeah, I am. And the story is that when we first got married, I was so much in love, I did whatever she wanted. She wanted to go to law school. I sent her to law school. I'm in love. About 2 years after she graduated, I woke up in a cold sweat. I'm saying, Lord have mercy, this woman can take all my money now. Well, I still hadn't gotten the message, and the Lord calls her, and He really did, to serve. So she says she wants to go to divinity school. And I said, okay. And 2 years after she graduated, I woke up in a colder sweat. I said, now, she can still sue me and take my money, but now she can make me go to hell at the same time. So yes, I'm married, and happily married, 32 years, but pastors are busy on Saturday nights, and I'm proud of her, but unfortunately she couldn't be here. Behold the turtle. It only makes progress when it sticks its neck out. That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to understand some realities. Some of you may be very pleased with what I'm saying, or going to say. Some of you may be upset with what I'm going to say. But I say it because I love you, and I believe in this country. And there's some things that we have to do to move ahead. So I'm going to share them with you. Remember when you would, as a kid, and I was a very bad kid, I had 6 brothers and sisters, and my mother reminds me I got more spankings than all of them combined. I was a challenge. But I knew one thing when I sat around that table. As much as I didn't want to hear what they told me, I knew they told me from love. And guess what? When you go out and you're in college and you've left the home, what do you remember most? The things you didn't want to hear. So I'm going to say some things that I hope you will take it in the right context. If you don't, that's tough. I'm the speaker and you're not. Okay, let's start out with the quiz. How many of people in the audience here call yourself a capitalist? I didn't say communist, I said capitalist. Raise your hand. Oh, this is one of the best responses. Come on, raise your hand. I want to see them. Okay, maybe 25, 30%. Good. Okay, I want the rest of you who didn't raise your hand to answer these questions as well as the one that did. How many of you believe in education? How many of you believe in saving? I said believe in saving. And creating assets. How many of you believe in controlling your own destiny? How many of you spend money? Somebody raised 2 hands. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just defined a capitalist. The question is not whether you're a capitalist, it's what kind of capitalist you are. You participate in this system. It's not bad, but it's as good as your understanding of it. And one of the things that we have to recognize, particularly in the African American community, is what the game of capitalism is. When you go to church, what's the first thing after the preacher gives that sermon? There is a capitalistic move in hand. It's called passing the plate. It's called tithing. It's called giving. It's called providing resources for the church and the communities that those churches serve. That's capitalistic, ladies and gentlemen. It's not bad. It's the way it is. And we have to understand that we haven't played this game in a way that we can win. You know, if I walk into a football game and I think it's soccer and I'm not padded up, I'm going to get my feelings hurt and everything else. Not because I'm not a good athlete, but because I don't know the game. And we've got to be very sensitive about this, because that's a critical factor in how you spend your energy and what your game plan is. And it's day to day. You know, the Final Four is on, and I remember a guy named Chris Webber who didn't remember that they didn't have timeouts. And remember that game that Michigan State lost? You got to know the rules of the game. But the game determines how it goes. And the rules of capitalism are not clear to everyone. They're clear to a few. And many of us view capitalism in a sense as we view Republicans and those that are dealing with money. And we've got to change that. You know, there are 5 ways to achieve wealth. If you didn't know, I'll tell you that. You can find it. You can steal it. You can win it in a lottery. You can inherit it. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way. You can marry it. I look at Mr. Bernie Madoff. Can you imagine making all that money, good or bad, legal, illegal, but spending all of his years with a roommate named Bubba? It's a hell of a way to go down, I'm telling you. Since this is on TV, I've got to clean up. I'm glad I realized it was going on TV. I can get very interesting and graphic sometimes. As they say in The Godfather, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. We capitalists say, keep your friends close, but your investors closer. It works better that way. And the person I really love who understands capitalism is the old philosopher, Reverend Ike. See, some of you too young to know, but you've missed on a great part of history if you don't know what Reverend Ike is. And so I won't take time to explain it for those that you know. And he said something that I think resonates very well. The best thing you can do for poor people is never to become one of them. Think about that. Think about that in the sense that that's what it's all about. And capitalists understand something else. They understand competition. You cannot get there because you have a great idea. You have to get there because you provide a good service that people buy. But the better the service, sometimes the more you introduce people interested in you. Competition may come from anywhere. It may come from within your family, your friends, people you work with. But I have a favorite story I like to share with groups that I speak with, and it's a story of 2 young men climbing a mountain. And I presume they weren't black. I'm not sure. We might be in the mountain climbing. I'm open to anything, but that's a new one. But, you know, it may happen. Anyway, they're climbing this mountain, enjoying the fruits of nature, just truly having a great time. And they looked up all of a sudden, and they had run into the midst of a 10-foot Kodak bear. One hiker got very nervous, panicked, didn't know what to do. The other hiker was cool. He looked at the bear, sat on a rock, reached up in his backpack and pulled out his running shoes. And the panicked hiker said, "What are you doing? You can't outrun that bear. He was lacing up his shoes. He said, I don't have to. I just need to outrun you. Your biggest competitors can be your best friends. But capitalism understands that that's the game. It's not bad or good. And one of the things that I hope to impart with you today is how the civil rights movement, please understand, this is one of the greatest movements in the history of mankind. I wouldn't be here in the way that I've been had people not given and sacrificed. But we also must recognize that we as people, we operate on two legs. And I just have not found the logic in my lifetime why we strengthen only one leg when we need to run on two. We don't participate on both parties. When I say I'm a Republican, I remember being introduced as a Republican and people booed. They didn't know who I was. They don't know that I believe in people. But I believe in people in a real way. I make it real. Being a Republican doesn't mean I agree with Republicans. I don't even like most of them. Really, this is embarrassing. Tea Party? Are you kidding me? I can say other things, but this is on TV. It's not negative. I mean, I respect the views. But I'm a Republican because I believe we've got to operate in balance. That's the way life is. You look at how God created life. It's the balance of life that is the beauty of life. And so when we only participate on one side, we deny ourselves the benefit of the strategy. We can't win the game if we don't know the rules to play the game. And that's one thing we haven't done, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got to do it. We're at that time when people talk about when I was growing up, and most of you are not old enough to remember some of the plans under Eisenhower. I was a kid. But I remember when my dad would take us and we'd get ready to go someplace, and they were building this interstate system. They would have the signs, and some of you are older than me, so I know you know. They'd have these signs on the gas stations before you entered the highway system because there weren't a lot of exits. Last stop, stop before highway. And that was a common sign. Well, that's what comes to mind. We're not going to have a lot of chances to turn this thing around, ladies and gentlemen. Competition is everywhere. The bear is running faster. And we've got to understand that what may have happened is all new. And it's a new game. It's a new paradigm. It's not good or bad. It's capitalism. You look at what's happening in Libya. You look at what's happening in Egypt. I never thought I'd see this, but it's happening. And the social networking is a phenomenon that I don't think any of us can absorb and appreciate and articulate. But it's real, and it's changing things in a way that capitalism is working everywhere. You can say democracy, you can say freedom, but it costs money, and that's what I call it. So when we look at our education, and I'm proud of our educational progress, but I'm disappointed that we haven't focused on skills. I was lucky. I grew up in Loveland, Ohio, which reminds me of Peoria, a little smaller. We had totes. Peoria has Caterpillar and other companies, but I'm on the board of Caterpillar, so I respect you, but I'm not you. But I want to know you. And sending our children to get degrees is great. I'm not a negative person. But I was a full-time night cook at 15 years old in Loveland, Ohio. My father died when I was 19. A circumstance I wasn't expecting. I was also a musician. And between that and my scholarships, I went through college without a beat. But if I had not had those skills, and you see, that's what it's all about, because skills drive education. And we haven't focused on the skill part. It's not negative that we're educated, but education has to lead to a skill, because if someone's going to employ you or you're going to become an entrepreneur, you've got to produce a product or provide a service that someone buys. It's very simple. It's not complex. It's very, very fundamental. And we've got to look at it this way. One of my favorite stories is this guy. Remember when we grew up, they had the junk man, collecting all that junk. Well, when I grew up, I don't know about you, but maybe junk man went out of business. But this man would be on his old truck, collect scrap, whatever it was. You give it to the junk man. But it's amazing. You follow the junk man home, he lived in a pretty good home. And he traded that truck for a Cadillac. And I remember the story where two ladies were talking about this junk man. 6th grade education, wasn't articulate, had horrible English, but he was very well off. And one says, he's all right, but he can't talk, and I'd be uncomfortable with him, and so on and so forth. And the other lady says, well, I'll tell you what, I'd rather someone tell me I is rich rather than I am poor. Keep it real, folks. Keep it real. That's what it's all about. And those junk men sent their kids to college. It's about providing that service and the need for entrepreneurship. Booker T. Washington has a phrase that I truly love, and I'll take you through it. Probably going to take a little longer than I thought, but I think this is important for us. No people ever got upon its feet and obtained the respect and confidence of the world, which did not lay its foundation in successful business enterprises. Business, commerce, and the ownership of property do not embrace all of the interests of our people. But one cannot find today a race or a nation that stands erect, secure in the appreciation, respect, and confidence of the world, that has not had its foundation in ownership of the soil, in bank accounts, in habits of thrift, and economy, and in business enterprise. This is a foundation that we recognize. We understood it. But from my experience, when we went from segregation, which was horrible, a terrible mark on our society, it was wrong, and it denied people. But interesting, black people thrived because they set up their own economy. They were suppliers, they were their purchasers, they bought from each other, and that left when the economy opened. And a lot of people don't realize that this integration was driven by economic principles, by capitalism. It wasn't driven necessarily because of what has emerged. At least this is my opinion, and here again, I'm the speaker, you're not. This has emerged from a social thing. It was a capitalistic move, and it was a smart move because it drove the competition out. Martin Luther King understood it. He understood it well, and unfortunately his time was taken sooner than it would have been. And I really appreciate what he's done. And I've got to share something with you that is very disappointing to me. Very, very, very disappointing. I think it was raised about $130 million for the Martin Luther King Monument, which will, I guess, be available this year. $130 million for Martin Luther King. And I said, okay, let me understand this. By the way, it was done in China, not done by black businesses. And in my opinion, it doesn't even look like, but that's personal opinion. I'll stop right there. And I said, okay, I went to my banker, my investment banker. I said, okay, give me an idea of what $130 million would be worth. And he went through some calculations, but the bottom line is, on a normal pre-tax portfolio return, between 5 years, that would be worth about $1 billion. Now, if I were Martin, and I saw this happen, and I had a day named after me, I have more buildings, streets, parks, schools than any person, maybe more than Lincoln. I'm not knocking, understand, I'm not negative. I'm just honest with you. I would have a problem not taking that $130 million, putting it to use, whereby people could benefit, not just look at me, and I'm on the mall. You see, this is where the reality of civil rights and economic rights kind of clash. Because I'm not saying anything against him. I am proud. He's a frat brother, for God's sake. I just thought I'd throw that in. But to take that kind of boost that could have made a difference to kids, to families, to futures, that's the way you want your legacy. And I would imagine that he's looking down on this very troubled. I'm very upset about it. Because those funds that went into that monument may be funds that won't go into other causes because there's not an unlimited supply of this. But that's the way capitalists look at it. Not because we don't believe in it, but we understand the strategy and the strength. That's what we've got to do more of, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got to recognize why we do that. People talk about economic development. And I was on a radio show, and a politician was there, and I never got invited back to the radio show, so I said, hell with it, I'll start my own radio show. I'm just kidding. But we got into an argument about economic development. I said, why are you so proud of economic development? We were talking about black businesses. I said, if you don't own the business or have equity in the business, all you have is a job. Economic development is not, it's good for the community. I'm not knocking it, understand. I'm not negative at all. But I understand realities. And if you don't get a return on what goes into that, then how do you move forward? It is not necessarily good because it's happening. I mean, it's good to happen as opposed to not happening. What needs to happen is you need to become economic developers and understand that this is a service that's needed. So here again, I'm just giving you a reflection of how capitalists look at some things that maybe seem cruel, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's what makes sense. We've gotten out of something that bothers me more than anything else as African Americans. We don't debate. I'm a Republican. I'm not bragging or complaining. But all I remember is when I was appointed by George H.W. Bush to the administration and to head a national effort, the first call I got was from William Gray, a Democrat, saying, I'm glad one of us is on the other side, understanding that we have to have balance. You can't get there unless we debate. It's not right or wrong, but we have to understand. I learn when I argue with people. I learn more when they show me where I'm wrong. I wouldn't get that unless I tried it, unless we had exchange of ideas. We do not debate politics in the black community. We do not argue. We vote 90% Democrat. If Magilla Gorilla ran for governor, and maybe in Illinois he may have, I'm not sure. You all have a serious political challenge. And this is on television. I've said enough about that. I'm from Maryland, so I don't get the social network hopefully will not cut me up too bad. But we've got to understand and weigh the issues. I remember so well, I was responsible for an event. I actually chaired the Maryland George H.W. Bush for president. And by the way, we won Maryland. So he had done at that time 88 to 92. He had appointed more black officials in higher offices than any president in history. So I said, you know, that's worth celebrating. So I chaired a group of people to put on a breakfast. Breakfasts are cheaper. Always do a breakfast, ladies and gentlemen. If you go away with nothing else, you keep that. And at the event at the J.W. Marriott, We had over 600 people. I mean, the place was going wild. And the enthusiasm, it was just infectious. And we had 3 rows of cameras from every network throughout, you know, because they have these pool situations where cameras feed out to other cameras. This was back in '92. I was feeling good. George Bush was on the podium. He was feeling good. We were, you know, doing this. Who started that? The comedian? Arsenio. Yeah, we were all doing the Arsenio. You know, it was just a fun time. So we waited for the news to happen. Guess what? The only report of George W. Bush that day, the most successful day for blacks and all of the people in the Bush administration, was a report of George Bush in Milwaukee at a 4-H club. Nada, nothing. And I understood something. The press rules. They did not, because they did not want to see that George Bush reached out to black people in a way that no other president had ever done before in history. And that's what we're dealing with. This is reality. And I find that it's caused me to grow, not to get angry, but to understand realities. Economic rights assure civil rights. It always did, it always will. Civil rights without economic strength is a borrowed event and can be taken away at any time because you don't own it. We've got to understand how economics plays into our freedom, into our rights of our loved ones. Martin Luther King said, "New laws are not enough. The emergency we face is economic." Tony Brown said it another way. A community of over 40 million people who emphasize civil rights over economic rights will never have equal rights. These are realities. I remember a conversation I had with John Johnson, who was one of the greatest entrepreneurs in America. He was phenomenal in every way. And he had called Martin to say that, "I'm going to come down and march on Selma." Martin said, no. You keep generating revenues. I need dollars for our cause. Other people can march that can't do what you do. So please stay in Chicago, give me money, don't march. He understood the balance and how this was so important for us to do that. I spoke at a NAACP conference. Just thought about it. They have never invited me back. I wonder why. Anyway, 10,000 people. And I'll tell you, I knocked the ball out of the park. I got 7 standing ovations. I mean, it was just something else. I was overwhelmed, feeling really good about myself. And James Lowry was in the audience. I mean, he's one of the speakers, about 5 speakers. He came to me and says, "I'm not going to let somebody from the Republican side outdo me." So he fired the audience up. And he probably got 10 standing ovations. I went to him after it was over. I said, "Jim, let me tell you something. Anybody that leaves an audience angrier at the end than they were in the beginning with no solution is not their friend."